Welcome to the 9th edition of our podcast series, Talking Data, which offers timely insights into macro data and its impact on the economy and markets. I'm Kristen Radish of Arbor Research and Trading, and I will be today's moderator. Our podcast features Jim Bianco of Bianco Research. Jim, the presidential election is on everyone's minds. We've had that first debate, and it's over. Now we're wondering, what are the changes between the polls versus the betting markets? Biden appears to be in the lead, but what's the latest?
Yes, both ways you cut it, the polls or the betting markets, Biden is leading, but there's a big difference. In the polls, if you go with the national average poll, he's leading about 6 points, maybe 7 points or so, and that's a pretty healthy lead. If you go by the state-by-state polls, Biden has got about 350 electoral college votes. He only needs 270. So poll analyzers like Nate Silver, 538, are giving Biden an 80% chance of winning the election. The Economist magazine has a poll analyzing group. They're giving Biden about an 85 to 88% chance of winning the election. And Charlie Cook at the Cook Report, another poll analyzer, has been on record for the last 2 months saying he can't find a path to Trump getting 270 electoral college votes to win the election. So if you go by the polls, it's over. And we're just basically arguing the size of a Biden victory. But if you look at the betting markets, it's a different story. Biden is still leading, but the betting markets have him at around 42% to win the election. Couple before the debate, they hit him as high as 46%. This is Trump to win the election versus 20% by Nate Silver and 13% by the Economist magazine. So that's a big difference. Anybody who's followed betting odds knows that somebody who's 42 to 45% chance of winning something, that's possible, and it's not a giant shock if you win it. If you're 13 to 20% to win something and you win it, that is a big shock. The betting markets also show that Biden has about 290 electoral college votes. Remember, you need 270, not 350 like the polls. And it shows that Trump is very competitive in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. He's behind, but they're giving him somewhere around low to mid 40s chances of winning those states. So it's possible if he picks up 2 or 3 of those states, 2 of 3 of those states, he could wind up being in the lead according to the betting markets. So really, it comes down to Biden is leading, but according to the bettors, it's very close. According to the pollsters, it's not close. Now, why make that difference? Last thing I'll bring up to you is, and this is investors. So a Survation is a polling group out of the UK, and they surveyed last week 91 investment professionals. 60% of them said that they thought Biden would win. Betting market has him at 59, 60, 61, somewhere right in there. So it's same number. September 15th, 2 weeks ago, CNBC surveyed about 60 investment professionals. 44% of them had Trump winning. Trump is trading in the betting market around 42. So investors' view is right in line with the betting market view. So if you think the polls are correct and that Trump has a 13 to 20% chance to win, that's not where investors are. Investors are more in the low 40s. There is still more Biden discounting to come. This market is not in line with the polls. I'm going to refrain from saying which one is right or which one is wrong, only because I can't find an example before where the betting markets and the polls differed. They're usually the same thing. And the benefit of the betting markets is they react faster to things like debates and stuff like that if there's a change in what happened. But rarely have I found them to be different. Now, again, both of them think Biden's going to win, but one of them has it very close and the other one doesn't have it very close.
Could you talk a little bit more about how this election is going to impact the financial markets?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, of course, is that we have to see which way. I suspect that this divergence between the betting markets and the polls will close by election day. I just don't know which
Okay.
way. Will it be that the bettors will fall down to 15% chance of Trump winning, and investors will follow and give Trump a 15% chance of winning? If that's the case, then I suspect that markets will struggle. One of the reasons I think that Trump has been so market positive is he's been a big regulation cutter. And that if you look at measures like the Federal Register's number of pages or any other objective measures of regulation, they're way down. And that has been a big boon for markets and profitability. Well, Biden is on record that he thinks that's a problem and he wants to re-regulate industry and he wants to raise taxes. I think that, those things alone are negative for the market. Now, there are other things that are going to affect the market over the same time, whether we get stimulus, how we're going to come out of COVID, will there be a second wave, and those things. So maybe those that, Biden winning is a market negative, but some of these other things could turn out to be positive. Maybe we find a vaccine, there isn't a second wave, we get a stimulus bill that Wall Street likes, market net goes up because it just overwhelms what's happening with the election. I just wanted to point out, it's not the only thing driving the election, but if the bettors and the investors come down to where the polls are, I think it's a negative response for the market. If the polls start to improve for Trump and it goes up to where the bettors are, there's not much positive reaction I think that Trump could get, or the markets could get out of Trump doing better, because they're already there. So I think it's, for the moment, it's more downside than upside. And I want to emphasize again, it's one of many factors that can move the market. We've seen this over the last couple of days. Trump has been slipping a little bit in the betting markets, but the market has been rallying because the prospects of a new stimulus bill has taken more attention than the negative, if you will, of what happened on Tuesday night's debate.
Can you touch a little bit on Trump's approval rating and also the ballot, the generic ballot?
Yeah, so Trump's approval rating, and what I'm going to use here is 538, Nate Silver's website, puts together a composite approval rating. They use like 50 polling services and they update it every day. And so they give you a trend of all of the polling services. And two things to note. First of all, Trump's total range of his approval rating has been from 39% to 46%, so something like 7 points. And if you go plus or minus one standard deviation, it's been plus or minus 4 points. Not only is this the tightest range any president has ever had, it is the tightest range by far that any president ever had. Other presidents could see their polling numbers move 5 or 6 points from poll to poll. Trump has had 5 or 6 points in 3.5 years from extreme to extreme. So one, he's really locked in on his approval rating. It doesn't move in total. Second, if you look at the last couple of months, it has been trending higher from the lower end of his range, around 40%, to up near 43%. Oh, that doesn't sound like a lot, but given his small range, it actually is. And I would argue that his approval rating has moved up more than he has in the head-to-head polling for him winning against Biden. The generic ballot. The generic ballot is whenever they ask a question on a pollster, they usually ask you, are you going to vote for the Democrat or the Republican in your congressional race? Not a name, not a specific race. Who you're going to vote for senator or for the 7th House district or something like that. Just if you're going to vote, which one, D or R? And that's called the generic ballot. Now, the Democrats have had a lead in that. But if you go back to July, their lead was over 9 points. Now their lead has shrunk to a little less than 6 points, and it's the lowest since March. So the Democrats are still leading, but it's been trending the last 2 months pro-Republican. Now, why do I look at the approval rating and why do I look at the generic poll? Because the betting markets still have the Senate staying as a Republican in the low to mid 40s. And I think that those are telling us that the Republicans winning the Senate is is more likely than Trump winning right now. Although, the Democrats are still above 50, but not by much, just like 53, 54%. as well. Even the polls are aligned. And the big thing about this is the polls are aligned with the betting markets. Because if you look at the polls, the Republicans have 53 Senate seats. And the polls are saying that if the election was held now, the Republicans would come out between 50 and 51 Senate seats. If it's 50 and Biden wins, Kamala Harris would break the tie and it would be a Democrat Senate. If it's 51, even if Biden wins, still remain a Republican Senate. So it's very, very close when it comes to the Senate. This talk about a blue wave, if the definition of a blue wave is the presidency and the Senate go Democrat, that's possible. But the Senate is really close right now. That might be the real nail biter when we come to the election night.
Jim, we've had a listener that submitted a question. I wanted to run it by you, and I think it's very representative of what might be on a lot of people's minds. What if there is not a clear winner? It's January 20th, 2021. No one has been declared. Can you kind of walk us through what happens next in this scenario?
Yeah, from Ghostbusters, dogs and cats living together, it's the end of the world. It's all going to be ugly and nasty. But seriously, let me run through a couple of scenarios for you. The first one is the Red Mirage. This is a phrase that left-wing sites like Axios and Vox have dubbed. Most of the pollsters will tell us that election day, people that go to the polling places will tend to skew more Republican. People that vote mail-in will tend to skew more Democrat. So it's possible that on election night, you're up at 1 a.m. and you're watching the polls, watching the election returns, Trump has won enough states that he has more than 270 electoral college votes. And he comes out and he says, I won. Then the next morning, they start counting the mail-in ballots. And one by one, Trump loses this state and that state and this state. And by the way, I'm not suggesting anything nefarious or fraud. That's another issue. This could be legitimately the case. And that by Thanksgiving, Trump has no longer won as well in the election. The problem I see with that scenario is if the guy that declares victory election night, or is at least leading election night, is not the ultimate victor, there is going to be a real problem on our hands in terms of credibility of the election as we go forward. Is there a precedent for this? Sure. Kirsten Sinema and Martha McSally ran for the Arizona Senate. Martha McSally was the Republican. Election night, she was ahead by 25,000 votes. They have mail-in ballots. Over the next 3 weeks, her 25,000 vote lead went to a 10,000 vote deficit, and she lost the election. You might remember John McCain passed away then, and then Martha McSally was appointed to John McCain's seat. So she is a senator now, but that's how she wound up losing, was she was a leading on election night, and then the mail-in ballot swung it to the Democrat. That happened in California in 2018 too. In California, something like 7 congressional seats, House of Representative seats. Election night, the Republican was leading. By the time they were done counting the mail-in ballots, it had flipped to a Democrat. So that's the Red Mirage scenario that people are saying, and that's a real credibility problem, only because I just think that half the country won't accept it. The other issue is, what if we don't get a clear victor, a certified election on noon, January 20th? The lawyers are going with the lawsuits, there's acrimony, everybody's accusing everybody of fraud, yelling at each other. January 20th at noon, there is nobody that's been elected. Well, the Constitution, from everything I've seen, is not real clear on this. But the best guess is that the House of Representatives would vote in a president and the Senate would vote in a vice president. This is a little different than if you have a certified election of less than 250 or less than 270 electors, so no one won, we're done counting. There's a different procedure for that. Each state gets a vote, and then we could see which way they go. This one, they think it might be the Senate the Senate is the vice president and the House is the president. The other issue is, do they have that right? And is the person voted in as a temporary president until they sort out the election mess, or do they get the whole 4-year term? if they make a decision that they go that way, and let's say they give them the whole 4-year term, if the Supreme Court rules that that's wrong, you have an illegitimate president, and that means anything that president's done, whether they've passed a law and signed it into law or an executive order, they're all voided. They all don't count then at that point. Let's just not go there. Let's just not go there, because what I'm trying to bring up is the Constitution never really thought of this idea of what if we're just all screaming and yelling at each other and still counting votes on inauguration time, noon on January 20th, and we still don't know who won. What do we do? And it's a little bit unclear on what we're supposed to do. So hopefully we don't go there, and hopefully we don't have a red mirage scenario or maybe a blue mirage scenario. It's possible Biden thinks he won on election day, and maybe the mail-in ballots go the other way. Who knows? Anything's possible in 2020, as we found. But the idea that you switch after election day will leave half the country feeling like it's illegitimate or stolen or worse, and it doesn't improve the situation in the country. So all I want to have is whoever thinks they won election night is actually the person that won, and that we don't wind up going back and forth with it several times.
Any final thoughts for today as we wrap up our topic of the presidential election?
Just that I want to emphasize that one more point. Investors are aligned with bettors at around 42% chance that Trump wins. Pollsters think it's more like 13 to 20%. This is unusual. Whatever is priced into the market is going to have to get, those two are going to have to get reconciled. I think that election day, they're both going to say the same thing. Whether they're both going to say it's a dead heat race, or if they're both going to say it's over and Biden won, remains to be seen right now. But there has to be some kind of reconciliation. So if you always think like I do, well, how do I play the election? And usually my answer is, well, the market's pretty efficient. It's already priced it all in. It could be wrong on its pricing, but it priced it all in. This time it's priced in a scenario that is not agreement with the polls. So something's going to have to get reconciled here. So I still think there's going to be election opportunity between now and November 3rd in financial markets. You tell me which way we're going to go on this. If I had to bet, yeah, it's a hard one, but I would go with that the polls would probably move more towards the betting markets, but I can easily see it going the other way.
Thanks, Jim, for your time and your thoughts today. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. As a reminder, Arbor Research and Trading is an institutional research and brokerage firm that produces innovative research across a broad range of global fixed income, equity, currency, and commodity markets. Bianco Research and Arbor Data Science are our two most prominent research offerings. For further information on Arbor Research, Bianco Research, and Arbor Data Science, please contact Gus Handler at gus.handler@arborresearch.com.